Hi, welcome to Cryptid Wilderness Research. I am CWR team member Daniel Becker up here in Anchorage, Alaska. Joining me as always, my fellow hosts, first from Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater.
Hello.
And of course, also from Anchorage, Alaska, as I say, a man who needs no introduction anywhere in the municipality of Anchorage, a man who does not make an appointment with the mayor makes an appointment with him, Paul Aya.
Hello.
And joining us tonight, back with us again, so happy to have her from the great state of Tennessee, from the Sisters of the Moon Research Group, Debi Porch. Welcome back.
Hi, glad to be back.
Debi, it was so great having you and your partners here last time. You have so many great stories and so much research that you and your partners have accomplished. Tonight, we wanted to talk about a couple elements of your research and a couple of the places that you've been. So let's start out on the West Coast at the Olympic National Forest in Washington State and up in Matt's neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And tell us about your research activities in that area.
Well, we went there just a few years ago, pretty recently actually. And I'll have to put my glasses on every now and then so I can make sure I get dates right and everything. But it was about this October, I think, September or October. It'll be about 4 years. But it doesn't seem that long ago. It seems like it was just yesterday because so many awesome things happened while we were there. We had planned to go out to a different location, and plans fell through on that. And I was talking with Shane Corson from the Olympic Project, just trying to get suggestions on some good areas, good locations to go to since our other location had fallen through. And he said, heck, why don't y'all just come here? And I was like, are you serious? And he was like, yeah. And I said, yeah, of course. How can I turn that down? And he goes, well, do you want to talk to Barbara and Sandy about it? And I'm like, no. I know exactly what they're going to say. You know, they're going to agree. And he's like, yeah, y'all just come on out here. You can stay here at our headquarters, you know, as long as you want. You can go around, you know, the forest. If you find a place you want to stay, then you can go there. He goes, I'm good with whatever. And I said, that's awesome. And so we did that. Sandy and I each flew from our home state. At the time I was living in Texas. That was before I got married and moved to Tennessee. And Sandy was in Georgia, her home state. And so we both flew from Georgia and Texas out to Washington. And Barbara carried all of our gear, all of our equipment, electronics, some of our luggage even, because, you know, we were going to be gone quite a while. And so we didn't have, we had to carry extra stuff, and we didn't want to pay for extra luggage on the airplane. So she carried everything, and her little dog, Ellie, that she takes everywhere we go camping. And they made the drive out to California, and she picked us up at the airport. I mean, not California, excuse me, Washington. And she picked us up at the airport. And actually, I believe we flew into Portland, Oregon. And I have family in Portland. And then we drove on up to Washington. And they're way up in the very northwest corner where the Olympic Project is. And it was absolutely beautiful. That drive was just awesome. And Crescent Lake, I believe, I think that's the name of the lake. It's right there just down the road as you're going to the headquarters. And it was just breathtaking. If nothing else, if we had not had any activity at all, just the drive out there was worth it.
So this was your first time in Washington State?
I had actually been to Washington before, but not to Bigfoot. And so it was, you know, a whole different adventure. And where I had been in Washington State, it was not in that area. And so it was all just a first time for pretty much all of us. And so anyway, we drove up there and got to the OP, and Shane was there, and the nicest guy ever. I mean, he's an awesome guy. And we stayed there at their headquarters. The first night we camped outside on their property, though, but we camped in our tent. And actually, I think we camped all 3 nights in our tent. And then during the day, we would go inside and do different things. We'd go back behind there and go up into the forest and hike and look and, explore. And had quite a bit of interesting things that we found while we were hiking. This was a funny story. While we were hiking, the first or second day, we had hiked a long ways, and we had our walking sticks, and I had a video camera, a little camera on top of it, kind of like a GoPro type thing on top of the walking stick. And we had not seen much of anything that was really interesting enough to video. And so I thought, I'm going to turn this off to save the battery, just in case, So I had just turned it off, and we get to where evidently there was a crossing path that we didn't know was up there, of course. And it wasn't 5 minutes after I had turned the camera off, and there's this male hiker that goes across that path in front of us, totally naked, except for a cap and a walking stick and a fanny pack.
That's Washington State for you.
Yeah.
That is, yep.
Oh, and he had hiking boots on with his socks,
Wow.
And I went, what was that? Whoa, did y'all see that? And they were like, yeah, is the recorder on? And I'm like, I just turned it off literally 5 minutes ago. So I just picked up my pace and ran up there trying to catch him. I turned it on. I thought, well, he just went that way, so I'm fixing to catch him on camera. Well, when I got down there and turned to look, he was nowhere to be seen. And I'm still laughing my butt off. And so they had caught up with me by that time. And I'm like, where did he go? There's no way he could have disappeared. But then from the tree line, just this little cluster of woods just right across from us, we could hear movement. And I looked over there, and I could see he was up in there fiddling around. I think that's probably where he either had his clothes hid to change into, or he was just hiding from us. But we were like, we laughed so hard, and we were like, that's not quite the sighting we were hoping for, but it was a memorable one for sure. But,
so when you got to this area, it being a new research area for you, a lot of researchers will say that when they enter an area, you can just feel the buzz, if you would, that this is heavy Sasquatch or cryptid territory. When you got there, did you feel that way?
Actually, no, we really didn't. We had a lot of anticipation leading up to it, but because we've gotten that feeling before that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. We'll pull into a place and we'll go, oh, this is good, but we really didn't feel that at first. And I don't know if it's because we didn't immediately go straight into the woods. We stayed there on the Olympic Project, property and stuff. And there was a road pretty close to it. And so there was a lot of traffic and everything those first couple of nights that we were there. And we just didn't have that feeling. But once we started really hiking in further and deeper into the actual forest itself, then we started saying, okay, this is good. And some of the places, it's like you're in a totally different world when you get into that forest. We were talking about how we expected little fairies to be flying around us because it just seems so magical and mystical there. Yeah. And I know one of the pictures I sent you of the prints where we've laid our sticks in the mud trying to measure the distance between the prints that we found while
Yeah.
we were there. That area was really a cool location. It was very mystical, like I'm talking about. Yes, that's the picture. We had gone off the beaten path and just went deep into the woods, basically, and found these prints there. And they were pretty cool. I mean, they were, you could see definite toes, and they were big prints. They were about, I think they
Wow.
were, if my memory serves me correctly, I want to say they were close to 17 inches.
Wow.
And then there was a huge stride between them. That's why we laid our sticks down, our walking sticks down, to show, because our walking sticks, you can see Barbara still has hers. They were pretty much as tall as we are. And I'm 5'9", and my walking stick was definitely my height. And I had the camera screwed in at the top at one point. And so that was a pretty good stride between the feet. And there were 5 prints, if I remember correctly. And of course, we didn't have any casting material with us.
Yeah.
On that hike. But I mean, just seeing them and being there was enough for us. And
That's
so
pretty cool.
that was really cool.
Matt, if you could go back to the print photo one more time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, you can tell that there were definite toes there, and the heel of it got very narrow. And then, of course, you can even see that there was a mid break there, I guess a mid-tarsal break.
Yeah.
And so we were excited that we had found them. We certainly wasn't expecting it. You're hopeful when you go Bigfooting, but we've gotten to where we don't get our hopes up. And so finding this, that was awesome for us. And but what happened on our I believe it was our third night there, that was even better.
Now, Matt, you're from that neck of the woods. I know that the Olympic National Forest is known to Bigfoot researchers.
Yeah.
And especially in the West. But for those who may be watching that are new to that area or just hearing about it, especially from the East, what can you say about that area of Washington?
Well, the Olympic Peninsula is kind of for Washington, it's sort of a remoter kind of area. It's outside of the Metroplex, the Seattle, Everett, Tacoma Metroplex. It's outside of that. A lot of small towns. But the majority of the Olympic Peninsula is heavily forested land. It's very dense, very old growth. It's one of those places you step 10 feet off the path and you're gone.
Yeah,
it's just a sea of green that doesn't end.
So, Debbie, when you came across these tracks and you guys were, measuring the strides, did you see anything else around that particular track area? Any other signs in the trees or tree structures, etc.?
No, not really. The trees there in the forest are totally different than what we're used to, in East Texas and the South and all through there. Totally different types of trees. God, it was beautiful. And we would see things that look like possible breaks and stuff, but it is so thick and dense that they crowd each other. And, it was hard to determine, oh, yeah, this is a definite tree break, or is this just being pushed out of the way because of the other growing items around it? So it was really hard to discern things like that.
It's very interesting that you say that because I experienced exactly the same thing over on Bainbridge Island, which is an island just about 30 minutes ferry ride from Seattle. I was also experiencing that same thing because most of the research that I had done had been in Arkansas and up here. So I actually took a picture of what I thought was a tree structure, but I had to have William Lunsford look at it because, everything was so crossed and, you couldn't tell what was what. So I experienced the exact same thing. So take us on from the tracks there and tell us more.
Well, after we had been there, I believe it was the third day or so, Shane was going to have to go back to where he lives and everything. And we wanted to actually get out into the forest and camp, away from any traffic, on a main road or anything, and away from their location there. And so we went back behind the Olympic project area. We went way on back in there and went up into the woods and kind of went up on a hill, get away from, everything else, and found a location that we thought looked good. It had a little bit of an open area, but not a real big open area, but big enough for us to get in there and set up our camp, and everything. And it was surrounded by trees, as you can see. We had over to the right, if I'm standing in front of our tent, over to the right, there was a lot of huge trees, but there was like this bush of some sort, big bush. And we always bring a lot of like glow necklaces, bright, shiny beads, almost like Mardi Gras beads, stuff like that. We had some gold bells that you hang on the Christmas tree, 2 big bells side by side with gold, silver, and all that. And we hung those on trees, around. And then we always use twinkle lights a lot in our camp, battery operated twinkle lights. We want to do things that are bright and shiny and interesting that might draw them in, because it's not something that you normally see in the woods, And so we usually put twinkle lights around the tent on bushes or trees or whatever, because it also helps create a light that's not real bright, but it's bright enough that if something walks between the twinkle lights in our tent, we're going to see shadows. And it's worked wonderfully before, for us several times when they have come up to our tent and we have seen their shadows. And so we just did things like that around our camp. And then if you are directly, just imagine if you're standing in front of the tent looking straight out from the door, there was, I don't know what kind of trees these were. I'd never seen any like this before, but of course they're just massive. But it was like a long grove of trees, and it went down like parallel. Like if I'm standing here in front of my tent, they would have went all the way down just in front of me and created like a wall. And then down to my left, just pretend like that wall hit a corner, and then you got another wall coming back towards us, and then another corner, and then it comes right up, and it's a whole nother wall. They're all the same kind of trees, and it ends just right before you get to our tent. And then there's all the trees that we put the bells and the lights and everything in. And that in the middle where we had our tent, that was all kind of open. So there was, when we got there, there was actually a burn ban. So we couldn't have a fire. And we're like, well, crap, it's going to be dark. We've got these little lanterns and some twinkle lights, but that's not going to put off a whole lot of light. And we had a little gas lantern that we lit, and we just put it there in the middle of us. And that was about all the light we had. And so I don't remember if it was the first night or the second night I think it was the second night when the big activity happened. The first night we had hung, we had those bells and everything and just different things scattered around. Well, some of the beads were missing, and one of the bells was missing. We looked all over because we're thinking, other animals can come in there, like squirrels or whatever. So we looked around to see if we could find anything that it might have even fallen off or gotten blown off, whatever the case may be. And it was gone. These items were gone. And so the second night, after we had spent the day in the woods and everything, the second night we're sitting out there around this lantern, and I had my back to the long row of trees, and then the other two girls were across from me at each angle. And this actually, I think this was one of the first times I'd ever kind of gotten unnerved. It was because it was just so weird what was happening. We didn't know what was going on, but Sandy, I think it was the night before, she thought she had seen something back behind our tent. And I didn't see it, but she had seen something and she had seen it move. And so we had that in mind from the night before. And then with everything being taken, a lot of things being taken that we'd put out, that was added to it. And so we're excited and hopeful, but we're not really expecting anything. And if we were expecting something, we weren't expecting what was about to happen. And so I'm sitting with my back to that long row of trees. These trees, y'all, were massive. And the branches that were lower and closer to the ground, they were kind of bare, and they looked black. They were very similar to what you're seeing here. And see how all of the bottom branches that are covered in moss, there's nothing on them. There's no leaves or anything. They're just covered in moss. And so if you're sitting looking at those trees, the sky is a little bit lighter back behind it, even though it's dark. But you can see kind of through there because these trees are so massive and tall. And because there's not any leaves at the bottom, you can kind of see through there. You understand what I'm saying? So that's exactly how they were. And so we're sitting there and we start hearing what sounded like this. It was like thrashing just through these branches back behind us. And I turned like this. And I mean, it sounded like something was going through there like a dinosaur because the branches were not low to the ground. They were up higher than what we were. And something was hitting those branches running through there. But now it's dark. The sky is black. We can't see through there. We can barely see the tops of the trees and the sky, the difference between that. And this thing, whatever it was running and thrashing through there. It sounded like a herd of elk. We thought maybe it was a herd of elk going down through there and their antlers were hitting it, because we're thinking that has to be big to be hitting these branches.
Yeah.
And y'all, I'm telling you, it was very unnerving. I got up literally and went on the other side of our little fake campfire, the lantern, and I'm standing where Barbara and Sandy are now at. And we're just all looking, and we followed it like if it started back past me, it went all the way down. And then where it intersected with that other tree line to cut back across, you could hear it. It stopped and it went through that tree line, and then it comes back up towards us to where it's coming now, like towards our tent. Oh. Now we get on the other side of the fire back to where I originally was, because we're like, what the hell is this? And it's coming. It went all the way down there, went across, and now it's coming back. So now we're starting to think, oh crap. And once it gets to the end of those trees, because they are all the same kind of trees, once it got to the end of that and to where our actual little campsite, which it wasn't a campsite, it was just a place we picked, that big tree that we had hung all the stuff on, it was just right there to the right. Right when it got there, it stopped. I mean, like a dead stop. So now we're just standing there and we're like, okay, come on. What's fixing to happen? Right. We were waiting. We didn't know what was happening. But we carry, we're female, and we don't necessarily carry for Bigfoot or any big animals, but because our guns aren't going to stop a Bigfoot. I mean, I'd have to shoot between the eyes, and I don't want to shoot one, but we carry because of the other humans that are out there. And so we all had our guns, but we keep them hid. We don't want them to be seen because we figured Bigfoot sees hunters. They know what guns are. Yeah. And albeit they're probably, rifles and shotguns more than anything else, but we have pistols. And we all had our hand ready because we're thinking we were going to have to draw something. And it just ended. It was just nothing. It just stopped right there. And so we're just standing there waiting, and seemed like an eternity. And then we were kind of like, okay, so let's just sit back down around the fire, the lantern, and see what the rest of the night brings. And so that's what we did. We sat there and we waited and waited. And then we went in the tent and nothing happened. Didn't have anything happen. Anything that we could hear, at least. We would hear some calls, but they were real far off. It was later that night, and we couldn't necessarily say, yeah, that was a Bigfoot or anything like that. But so the next day, we had all, put some more stuff out. It was gone. It was gone again. And that was as far as activity, other than finding the prints and then having this big crashing through the woods and then coming and stopping right there. That was pretty much it for activity in the Pacific Northwest.
Paul, going to Paul here real quick. You've been out in the woods a lot. Have you ever heard anything stampede through the woods like that?
Sometimes you hear a moose trotting through the willows.
Yeah.
If it's something big, it'll scare the heck out of you.
Right.
No matter what it is, if it's big, you could tell it's big.
Yeah. Well, this definitely sounded very big. And I honestly, I don't know how it made the sound it was making. It sounded like it was a herd of something coming through there. But at the same time, we could still see the difference in light. Mm-hmm. And we never saw like any dark shadows going through there. But the fact that got us, that made us think, okay, this could have been a possible Bigfoot or whatever, was the fact that I would think, or we thought that if it was some sort of animal and it was running from our, back behind us, going down that way, it would have kept going and not cut back and come up through those trees that were at the end and then come back up right beside our tent and stop. That's what made us, think that it was possibly Bigfoot. Of course, we have no way of knowing. There's so many, well, what if it was Bigfoot or what if it wasn't? We didn't see it, so we don't know. But something was taking our stuff off of these trees. And we have a little stool that we use, and we stand up on the stool. I'm 5'9", and so I've got a pretty good reach. And I put it way up on my tippy toes while standing on this stool. I put it up as high as I can get. Wow. And that stuff was gone. So something took it. But anyway.
We've got some great pictures that you provided us to go through. Matt, why don't you pull up the next one?
Let's see here.
Let's start here.
Well, that's Barbara and Sandy. Sandy is on the side by herself. Barbara and Sandy are actually sisters. And then Barbara is standing there with Shane Corson. And as you can see, they have all sorts of prints and casts that they've made of footprints that they found. That's a huge metal building that they're in. And I mean, it's huge. And that bar that they're standing at, if you look closely, you can tell that it's got toes.
Yeah.
So that's their Bigfoot bar. And then back to the backside, you can kind of see that there's a door back there. And if you go back in there, there's some mattresses, and we slept back there one night. And then there's a bathroom and everything. But it also has a second level that you can kind of see where it looks like it's trimmed out and all the castings are hanging up there. That place is huge. It's just huge in there. And he showed us so much stuff, and he showed us videos that they've got of Bigfoot. I mean, they have got some good stuff, where it's no doubt what it is you're looking at. And
Right.
so just being able to visit with him for 3 days there, that was worth the trip all in itself. I mean, we felt so blessed that he let us stay there and then camp out, back up behind it and do whatever, use that as a headquarters. Awesome people.
What were the weather conditions while you were there in that area?
It was perfect. We couldn't have asked for more beautiful weather. It was not hot during the day. I mean, that guy that was naked, he was probably a little chilly. But thank goodness he was. But we had just regular. You can see Sandy has on kind of a long sleeve shirt, and she had her sleeves pushed up, and I wore short sleeves like Barbara has most of the time. But in the evenings, it got really cool. But their Lake Crescent is really close, and I think I sent a picture of Lake Crescent with the mountains and the sky and the clouds and everything, just because it's such a beautiful area. And that's, a good ways down the road going back in the opposite direction from the coast. And it was beautiful. It's an awesome place. I'd love to go back.
And of course, the reason I'm asking for those who are new to this and watching us now, we as researchers know that weather conditions can often influence the level of activity that you experience in a research area. So that's why I was curious about what kind of weather conditions you experienced while you were there.
Yeah, it was perfect weather. Couldn't have asked for better.
Excellent. Matt, let's go to the next one.
Well, I do have that lake, Crescent Lake. Just added that to the show here.
Oh, excellent.
Is that not the most beautiful thing?
Gorgeous.
I mean, we drive. It was a long ways to get into any kind of town, and so we just would go down to a convenience store that was a good ways down, because this wasn't real close to them. And I was like, yeah, let's go ride, because I wanted to go by this lake. Oh God, it was beautiful. And I mean, you can tell just by looking at that, those hills are covered in solid trees.
Yeah.
And it is nothing but trees for miles and miles and miles and miles.
Yeah,
That's
that
awesome.
is Western Washington. It's just old growth forest as far as you can see.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, let's see,
gorgeous.
I did add another picture of your campsite.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, we had lights set up as much as we could, since we couldn't have a fire.
Now tell you mentioned the blinking lights. Tell us about the lights that you set up.
Yeah, we use just regular Christmas lights, like the Christmas lights that you put on the trees. We'll use the kind that twinkle, and then the ones that, you can keep them solid glowing all the time. And you can even see, like on the tent here in this picture, there was a light inside the tent, and you can see how we had a tarp. Okay, this tent, the way this tent is here, before you put the cover, we put a tarp on top, and then we put the cover on top of the tarp to hold the tarp down in case there is inclement weather. Sometimes it gets windy, and And at night, it got kind of cool there, and you can see Barbara has a jacket on. And so we put a tarp, and if you look in the corner over to the left of the picture, you can see a shadow of the tarp under the top of that tent cover where it comes down into like a point. So when we're inside and our lights inside are off, and we have lights on the outside, in the trees or the bushes surrounding the tent, if anything walks between there, it's definitely going to cast a shadow on the sidewalls of the tent. And when we don't have a tarp on top, we have even been able to see them as they've gotten up and then walked past our tent. We've literally, in Georgia, we saw two come up to our tent. One was short and one was taller, and it was walking straight towards the front of our tent. It actually came, evidently, we think it came from across the little road we came in on. It went straight up a hill. We think it came in that way. We still had a little bit of fire going in camp. Two of them walked straight in, and we had set our beds up in a U shape, where my head was at the front on one side of the door. My feet were at Sandy's head. Sandy's feet were at Barbara's head, and Barbara's feet were up at the front on the other side of the door. That way, I can kick Sandy in the head, and Sandy could kick Barbara in the head and wake them up. And that's what we ended up doing at that time in Georgia when the two came up and walked right by our tent and went behind us, and we could see them. And it's awesome when you're able to see them, and all that, know where they're at least. And so that's why we do it like that. And I love being able to know exactly what it is maybe that we're hearing, because sounds can be very deceiving. And especially when you're there for Bigfoot, you don't want to just assume everything's a Bigfoot. And so you have to really argue with yourself sometimes. We've had lots of, saying, okay, calm down. It's not necessarily a Bigfoot. Let's wait and see, what else we hear and stuff. And, but when
that is one of the markers of a good researcher.
Yeah, we try not to jump to conclusions, and as new researchers back years ago, you can scare yourself to death. And we learned really quick, we don't want to do that, because I don't know, we love this so much. It's like an adrenaline rush for one thing, but we have had times to where we're like, okay, this is getting a little tense. You have to be very level-headed. So that's why we try to stay just as open-minded as to what else it could be. We don't want to have that Bigfoot brain. And knock on wood, I think we've done pretty good, with being able to discern, okay, is this something else? What can this be? Let's go through all the options here before we jump to Bigfoot.
That's fantastic. Your team being innovative in your approaches with the lights and trying different things and trying to break new ground in some way. That's fantastic. So you guys did the Olympic National Forest, and what did you do after that?
Well, I don't know. There's so much. We've done a lot since then.
Did you guys make it down to Oregon also?
We did. We went to Oregon. I have family in Oregon. I have a brother and a sister there. And so we went down there and visited with them. And then we all flew back home. But since I do have family in Oregon, I go out there as often as I can. And my brother and sister, I was adopted when I was 3 days old. And so these are my biological brother and sister that we all had the same biological mother. And I found them several years ago, and we're so much alike, and we look alike and we act alike, except they're from Oregon. They don't have my Southern accent. And we just became, it's like we've never been apart. And so my brother loves to camp just like I do. And I told him, I'm like, okay, I want to go camping when I come down there. And so he took me camping, and it was a great spot. I mean, it was really good. We had a lot of really interesting things that happened there. And I sent y'all some pictures for that location.
Yeah.
Oh, I got some of those. Yes.
Yeah,
Let's go through these.
Yeah, that's my brother right there. And you can see the tent over there to his left. It was just a small little tent. It wasn't anywhere as big as the green tent that y'all saw just a few minutes ago, how it had all those extra little areas in it.
Yeah.
This is a small, what you're seeing right there is basically half of that tent. And at the time we were camping, it was me and him, his ex, they were still together, and his little boy, who is now a teenager. But at the time, I mean, this was, I think, like 4 years ago. I'd have to look at the date. Let's see. Oh, this was 7 years ago. Good grief, time flies. Yeah, this was 7 years ago. And it took forever to get up there. And there was all three of us adults, his little boy, and two big dogs, all in that little bitty tent. And we were wall to wall, and we also did not have anything over the top. It was all mesh. And I got to say, I had to sit there and go, okay, Debbie, just don't look out the tent top. Just because, I'm sitting there thinking if a Bigfoot walked up, it could just look in there.
Yeah.
And so
right in the top.
Don't even look at the top up there, Debbie, even though it was beautiful because you could see all the stars and everything. And we had to drive up there, and then we had to hike in a good ways. And we made several trips back and forth carrying the chairs and the everything. And but anyway, so yeah, we're there, and it's an open area that's surrounded by trees all the way around, and there's a great big lake. Well, it's more like a great big pond, but it's called a lake. The name of it is a lake. And it's on down. And then on the other side of the trees, you can see the peak of Mount Hood just right there. I mean, it was the most, yeah, look at that. I mean, is that not a view?
Nice.
And oh gosh, it was beautiful. And that's the lake there. And, but you see how thick those trees are.
Yep.
And we came up through those trees. So the first evening that we were there, the very first evening, we had set up kind of a, one of them foldable tables, opened up, and my ex-sister-in-law, Cynthia, her name is Cynthia, and then our sister's name is Cindy. And our sister came up the next day with her husband. But Cynthia had, the stove and everything sitting on that big table and everything. And it was up against, real close to the trees that circled all the way around us. And while we're setting up camp, it sounded like from the sky, you could tell it was coming from above the trees. I mean, it was just starting to, the sun was just starting to go down. We heard these it sounded like 4 calls, but I'd never heard anything like this before. And it came from like directly in front of us. If we had came from back here, it was on the opposite side above the trees. It sounded like it was up in the sky. And there were 4 calls that overlapped each other. And so there had to be at least 2 different beings, whatever they were, Bigfoot or humans, I don't know. But as massive and as loud as these calls were, we tried to mimic them 3 days later because we were there for 3 days, and we couldn't do it, not to that powerful sound like they were doing. But it was like one would go, I can't do it, but one was like, ah, and before that would get through, there'd be woo, yeah, ah. I mean, it just overlapped. but it was so loud and so massive. And we all just kind of stopped dead in our tracks because we were still setting stuff, down and trying to get things organized. And we all just kind of looked up in the sky because in front of us, those trees made that corner again, where they all kind of connected. And I was like, holy crap. And Johnny goes, was that Bigfoot? And I said, I don't know. I said, but I don't know how humans could be that loud and that massive. And I mean, it was crazy. And of course, we hadn't had time to put recorders out or anything at that time. And so anyway, we proceed on setting up the rest of our camp. And then we get dinner going and everything. And Johnny had the two big dogs. And I mean, they were big dogs, like up past your knee, that tall. The backs were big dogs. And one was black and one was tan. Well, Johnny gets his ball that he plays with his dog, and he goes out towards that tree line that's directly on the other side of us. And as he's doing that, he's calling the dogs, come on, boys. And he's whistling, and stuff. And Cynthia and I are up in camp. Aiden, his son, my nephew, he's running around, being a boy. And so one of the dogs goes off and runs towards Johnny. And Johnny picks up the ball and he throws it back. And when he throws it back, the other dog gets it and goes. And he's calling that dog. And Johnny runs up. He comes up to camp where we're at. And he grabs the ball away from the dog, and then he goes back out. And as he's walking back out to that location he was just at, which was close to the trees, from right behind where he's at, there's a loud tree knock. And I just start grinning like I am now, actually, because I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm excited. And Cynthia, my ex-sister-in-law, she's over here to my left. She goes, what was that? And I'm grinning. And I said, well, I don't know. We'll see. And she goes, was that a Bigfoot? And I'm like, well, possibly, I said, we'll see. Well, Johnny's still running around. He's oblivious to what just happened because he's hollering, calling the dogs and stuff. And so I go, Johnny, come here a second. So he comes back in. And I told him, I said, I want you to do the exact same thing you just did. Go back out there, call the dogs, everything, but stay up here for just a minute or two before you walk back out there. And he goes, okay. He didn't ask me why or anything. So he does it. He goes back out there. As soon as he gets that same exact spot, boom, another tree knock. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Now I'm excited, And Cynthia's like, you mean that's a Bigfoot? I'm going, well, I'm not going to say that it's a Bigfoot, but I'm excited about it. And so Johnny, I said, come here, Johnny. I call him back in there. And I said, okay, I want you to do it one more time. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, have you heard that big bang? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, something's causing that big bang on the trees. And he goes, okay. I said, so go back out there like you did. So he's walking back out there, and then he stops and he turns around and he looks at me and he throws his arms out to his side. He goes, wait a minute. I'm bait. And I just laughed and I said, kinda, go on. And he goes, no. And so anyway, that was hilarious. So I had put one recorder out in those woods, kind of it would have been my left from where he was at. And then I had put another recorder up closer into our camp area. And they were just, the little recorders, not the big, fancy, expensive ones. Because like I said, this was 7 years ago. And I had not invested in the high dollar ones, kind of like some that they're not really expensive that we have. But, $100 is expensive for a recorder. Yeah. But so I had those both going. Brand new batteries. One of them was a brand new recorder. And they're both out. One's up closer into camp, one's out there kind of where he was at. So we're in camp. just sitting, talking, everything. We go to bed, and I'm laying there saying, Debbie, don't stare out the ceiling. You're going to get yourself worked up. Just roll over, go to sleep. Well, we hear calls. And of course, Johnny and Cynthia are both like, was that a Bigfoot? Was that a Bigfoot? And I'm like, y'all, I don't know. Let's just listen, And long story short, we fall asleep. We wake up. And the next day, my sister, Cindy, and her husband, Rocky, are coming out there. And so we sit in camp. We visit and everything. We are running around playing with Aiden and chasing each other, playing tag, me and my sister. And I'm hollering at Cindy, Cindy, Cindy. And then Cynthia, I'd say, Cynthia, so-and-so, whatever. Just do this off and on all day. Well, Cindy and Rocky, they end up, leaving, going back home. So that night, we go to sleep, don't hear anything. Get up the next day, I go out, Cynthia's cooking breakfast. It's just me, Cynthia, and Johnny and Aiden again. So I'm out there with Cynthia. The boys are still asleep. And I said, how long you been up? And she said, oh, about an hour. And she goes, did you hear those people last night? And I said, what people? Because there weren't any other people around us. And she goes, somebody's camping back over that way. I said, where? I said, there's no place to camp. I mean, where we were at, the way it was open, that was about it for a long ways. It was all solid trees. I mean, tree. There wasn't room really for a tent or anything. And we had, now, see, this is all kind of open right there. But you can see all the way around back in there how thick that is. That's how it was all the way around our perimeter. And we had to hike in a good way. See, it's thick as thieves right there. And I said, Cynthia, there's nobody around here. And, Johnny and I had hiked all through some of those areas the day before. And I said, what did you hear? And she goes, somebody was calling their dog. I said, calling their dog? She goes, yeah, they were going, Cindy. And I start grinning. And I said, wait, what? And she goes, they were calling Cindy. And then she goes, oh. I said, I'm grinning now, and I'm going, I said, who was in camp with us yesterday, Cynthia? And she goes, you mean they can talk? And I said, well, they have been known to mimic.
Yes, very true.
Goes, oh my God. She just freaked out. She said, Johnny, get your ass up. Oh, I'm sorry. She said, Johnny, get your butt up. We're leaving. Yeah. And she woke him up, and we ended up packing up and leaving. She didn't want to stay there. But she said that she heard it call Cindy twice. And so, anyway, so I run out there to get my recorders. I was excited because I'm like, if she heard that, then my recorders picked it up. Mm-hmm. I go out there, both of my recorders dead as doornails. I mean, just completely dead. And I had extra batteries with me. So I put batteries in there thinking, well, maybe they still recorded. They didn't go 5 minutes in and they both stopped. I mean, 5 minutes. Both of them stopped. That just baffled me. I mean, they were a good distance apart too, but didn't have anything on there. So
William Lunsford and Stephen Hill and I came up with a term for the technology interference. We call it CEI, cryptid electronic interference. So that is a prime example of what possibly could be that.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had it happen to that extent before, where both recorders, within 5 minutes of me turning them on and setting them down, that they both quit recording. I've never had that happen. Now, I have had them, die in the middle of the night, but it's at least recorded a little bit. But that was 5 minutes in on both of them. That's what was so weird. But
before we close, let me throw the ball over to my partners, Matt and Paul. and give them an opportunity to ask some questions, because I've been asking all the questions. I apologize, gentlemen.
Both of these expeditions that you've been on sounded just amazing to get the experience that you've had out there in the wildlands here in Washington and Oregon. And I'm trying to get that put together too, get myself out there. I'm a loss for words because it's such a great encounter that you've had.
We've been really lucky.
I know that the Olympic Peninsula, I know just about how far away from many major towns that area is. But in Oregon, how far outside, where exactly were you at in Oregon? Around what area?
I don't even know because I'm not from that area.
Yeah.
I know that we followed there was a river beside us. I'm not sure which river it was. And like you can see that, Mount Hood was on the other side over there. That lake, I can't remember what the name of it was. I'll have to look, but it was
good distance.
Yeah, it was it took us a long time from the town that they lived in. They lived in, I want to say it's Willamette, maybe, or something around that area. And, but it took a long time to get out there and then to hike in, it was a long ways. Oh, and another thing that I want to mention about that area, the reason he took me there is because years earlier, I mentioned he had a son. Well, his son was from his another wife. And years before any of that ever happened, it's probably 20-something years ago, he had been married before. And they had camped up on top of not a mountain, but it was up above the ridge, the trees and everything, on the other side from where we were at. And this is what got him interested in it. He said they were sleeping in sleeping bags just outside, and they were on this edge of a kind of like a cliff, started going down the hill. And while they were in their sleeping bag, they could hear something run through their center of their camp. And he said that it had 2 feet and that you could feel the earth just boom, boom, boom as it ran. And then you could hear it like jump. And he hit his wife over there next to him. He was like, "What the hell was that?" And she said, "I don't know, but I don't want to stay here." No. But that's why he took me to this location. He said it's real close, and we hiked over to close to the area, and he kind of said it's up there, and so that was cool in itself.
That sounds amazing as well.
Yeah.
Paul, I
just want to thank you for your story. It was awesome. What time of year did you go? Was it July, June? Because I know it rains a lot in
to Oregon.
Yeah.
Let me see if I wrote that down. I tried to write down stuff so I could remember. That was in September.
Oh, okay. Wow. There you go. Yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah. But it was perfect weather.
Oh, was there any bugs?
No.
Bad?
No, it's nothing like the South, that's for sure.
You don't bring them in.
Yeah, it's beautiful there.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I appreciate hearing your encounters there. That was something else.
Well, thank you. It was exciting. I mean, and to be able to not just like experience it, but to share it with my brother. Of course, my sister was there during the day. She didn't want to experience anything, but she's like, "Oh, no, we're not staying." But my brother was, he was excited, and so until I told him, well, just go out there again. Let me see if we get another tree knock, and that's when he was like, "So you mean I'm bait?" He wasn't cool with that.
Oh, that's great.
Well, we always find it fascinating to hear the accounts of predominantly Eastern researchers that travel west and experience the Western research areas for the first time, and what their perceptions are and what their experiences are. It's always great hearing those those accounts. I'm sorry, Matt, were you going to say something?
I do have one more photo here from the Oregon trip. It looks like it's sort of high up in the trees.
Oh,
with
yeah.
the ridge
Oh,
lines.
that's a good one.
Yeah. I wish I could go back there more often.
And it's just endless. It just keeps going and going.
We went into town when the girls and I were there, me and Sandy and Barbara. After we left Washington, we, of course, we had to fly back out of Portland. And so we drove back down to Oregon, and we ate there, and my brother and sister and them came out and visited with us out there before we left. And that was nice. And we went to Cliff Brackman's. We ate right next door to his museum. And so we went over there to his museum and looked around there, and that was a neat place, and visited with him for just a short time, and then flew back out. But we do want to go back.
Yeah.
So what do you got on the upcoming plans? Any more trips out west planned in the near future?
We have talked about it.
Research?
Yeah, we have talked about it. Of course, now that I'm married, I'm in Tennessee for a while.
Another great area.
It is, yeah. And Larry is a researcher as well. I mean, Bigfoot brought us together. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, because of Bigfoot, that's how we met. And good thing that we both like Bigfoot, because and we've camped a lot, and we've had some experiences. Of course, you can only assume that it's Bigfoot. Some of the stuff, you can't just always jump to that conclusion. You have to be able to differentiate things. And so we do try to say, okay, what are the possibilities that what we're hearing or what we're experiencing can be something else? We've had, when it's us girls, we've had a lot more activity than if it's like me and Larry or anything. And so we think that that's one of the keys, is because we're female, and because it's usually just 2, sometimes 3 of us. Because a lot of times Sandy, with her being in Georgia, and I lived in Texas up until October of this past year, and Barbara lives in Texas. So Barbara and I would go camp quite a bit. And Sandy was, always in Georgia, and she would try to fly in and meet us wherever. But for the most part, there was just a couple of us. And so we were really lucky to have a lot of experiences. And we think it is because we're female and we're less intimidating. And we smell better.
Gentlemen, any closing thoughts or questions?
Oh, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's always a joy, and just these amazing stories and encounters that you have from your many research areas. It's so great.
Yeah, I enjoy it. We've been very lucky. Thank y'all for having me on, and hopefully we'll have some more stuff happen in the near future. Who knows?
Oh, I'm sure you will. Paul Ayotte.
Yeah, like Matt said, thank you. And thanks.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Debi Porch from Sisters of the Moon, thank you so much again for joining us and sharing your great experiences and bringing your unique perspective in research to us and sharing it. We really love you and we appreciate you. And we're looking forward to hearing about what both you and your husband and you and your partners do in the future. And we know there's great things ahead for all of you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, y'all. It was nice to meet you, Paul.
Nice to meet you too.
So for myself, Daniel Becker in Anchorage, Alaska, for my fellow hosts, first in Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater, and just a few short blocks away from me as we speak, Mr. Paul Ayotte. And once again, from Sisters of the Moon, Debi Porch, down in the great state of Tennessee. Debi, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Night, footers.